Hello and welcome. Today, I'm going to whisper to you about a fascinating and complex topic, the Iranian Revolution. So, get comfortable, relax, and let's dive into this incredible story together. The Iranian Revolution, which reached its peak in 1979, was not a sudden event but the culmination of years of underlying tensions and discontent. To understand the revolution's roots, we need to delve deep into the social, political, and economic landscape of Iran before the upheaval. This will provide a comprehensive picture of why the revolution happened and its profound impact. The Shah's regime and modernization efforts. Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi came to power in 1941 following the abdication of his father, Reza Shah, under pressure from the Allied forces during World War II. Determined to modernize Iran and transform it into a major global player, the Shah embarked on an ambitious program of reforms known as the White Revolution in 1963. These reforms aimed to overhaul the agricultural sector, industrialize the economy, and modernize the social structure. The land reform policy was one of the most significant aspects of the White Revolution. The Shah aimed to break the power of the traditional landowning class and redistribute land to millions of peasants. However, the implementation of these reforms was fraught with problems. Many small farmers were unable to make a sustainable living from the small plots they received, leading to increased rural-urban migration. This migration resulted in the rapid expansion of urban slums, exacerbating social inequalities and discontent. Industrialization and urbanization were also central to the Shah's modernization efforts. The oil boom of the 1970s brought substantial revenue to Iran, and the Shah invested heavily in infrastructure projects, education, and healthcare. However, the benefits of this economic growth were unevenly distributed. While the urban elite enjoyed unprecedented wealth and luxury, the majority of Iranians saw little improvement in their living standards. This disparity between the rich and the poor created a sense of injustice and fueled the growing opposition to the regime. Cultural changes and public reaction. Culturally, the Shah's push for westernization alienated many Iranians. The adoption of Western lifestyles, fashion, and entertainment clashed with traditional values and Islamic principles. The Shah's secular policies, which included the promotion of Western education and the marginalization of religious institutions, were perceived as an assault on Iran's cultural and religious identity. This cultural shift was particularly evident in urban areas where Western influences were most pronounced. The growing presence of Western companies, the proliferation of Western media, and the adoption of Western social norms created a deep cultural divide. Many Iranians, especially those in rural areas and conservative urban centers, felt that their way of life was under threat. The Shah's close alliance with Western powers, particularly the United States, further fueled resentment. The 1953 CIA-backed coup that restored the Shah to power after Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh's nationalization of the oil industry left a lasting legacy of mistrust towards foreign interference. The perception that the Shah was a puppet of Western interests was widespread, and his lavish lifestyle, funded in part by oil revenues, contrasted sharply with the poverty experienced by many Iranians. Political repression and the emergence of opposition movements. The Shah's regime was marked by political repression. The Savak, the Shah's secret police, was notorious for its brutality and widespread surveillance. Political dissent was ruthlessly crushed, and opposition parties were banned. Freedom of speech was severely restricted, and many political activists were imprisoned, tortured, or forced into exile. Among the most vocal critics of the Shah was Ayatollah Khomeini, a charismatic cleric who opposed the Shah's secularization policies and his close ties with the West. Khomeini's sermons and writings, which were smuggled into Iran after his exile in 1964, resonated deeply with a broad segment of the population. He advocated for an Islamic government and criticized the Shah's regime as corrupt and oppressive. The 1970s saw a confluence of factors that intensified opposition to the Shah. Economic challenges, including rising inflation and unemployment, further eroded public support for the regime. The oil boom, while bringing wealth to the country, also led to rampant corruption and economic mismanagement. The Shah's attempts to placate the opposition with superficial reforms only served to highlight his inability to address the underlying issues: growing discontent and the road to revolution. By the late 1970s, Iran was a tinderbox of discontent. The combination of economic hardship, social dislocation, cultural alienation, and political repression created a volatile environment. The spark that ignited the revolution came in January 1978, when an article defaming Ayatollah Khomeini was published in a government-controlled newspaper. This provoked widespread outrage and led to protests in the city of Qom, which were violently suppressed by the police, resulting in deaths. These events set off a cycle of mourning and protests, as Iranian tradition dictated memorial services 40 days after a death. Each memorial became a new protest, and each protest led to more violence and more deaths. This cycle continued throughout 1978, with protests spreading across the country and drawing in diverse segments of society, including students, intellectuals, workers, and religious leaders. The opposition to the Shah was diverse, encompassing secular nationalists, leftists, and Islamists. Despite their ideological differences, these groups were united in their desire to overthrow the Shah. Ayatollah Khomeini, from his exile in France, became a unifying figure for the opposition. His messages, calling for the establishment of an Islamic Republic, were widely disseminated and resonated with the disillusioned populace. As the protests grew in size and intensity, the Shah's regime resorted to increasingly brutal measures to maintain control. Martial law was declared, and the military was deployed to suppress the demonstrations. However, these tactics only served to further galvanize the opposition. The Shah's attempts at political reforms, including the appointment of a new prime minister and promises of free elections, came too late to quell the revolutionary fervor. The road to revolution. The year 1978 was marked by a series of escalating protests and strikes that gradually eroded the authority of the Shah's regime. The growing discontent among the population manifested in various forms, from peaceful demonstrations to violent clashes. The momentum for change was building, and the opposition's resolve was hardening. The escalation of protests. The cycle of mourning and protests, triggered by the deaths of protesters in Qom, continued to spread across Iran. Each 40-day mourning period, Jihlam, for those killed in previous protests became a new opportunity for mass demonstrations. These gatherings often turned violent as security forces responded with increasing brutality. The government's heavy-handed tactics, instead of quelling the unrest, fueled further anger and resentment. Throughout 1978, the protests grew in size and frequency. Cities like Tabriz, Mashhad, and Isfahan saw massive demonstrations. The urban centers, which had benefited the most from the Shah's modernization policies, now became hotbeds of opposition. The diverse coalition of opposition groups, including students, intellectuals, merchants, and clerics, began to coordinate their efforts more effectively. Strikes by workers, especially in the oil industry, crippled the economy and demonstrated the regime's vulnerability. The role of Ayatollah Khomeini. From his exile in France, Ayatollah Khomeini emerged as the spiritual and ideological leader of the revolution. His messages, disseminated through smuggled tapes and pamphlets, reached a wide audience. Khomeini's rhetoric was powerful and unifying. He called for the overthrow of the Shah and the establishment of an Islamic Republic. He framed the struggle as a moral and religious duty, resonating deeply with the predominantly Shia Muslim population. Khomeini's ability to appeal to a broad spectrum of society was crucial. He positioned himself not just as a religious leader, but as a symbol of resistance against tyranny and corruption. His vision of an Islamic government promised justice, social equality, and the restoration of Islamic values, which appealed to the disillusioned masses. The Shah's response and mistakes. Facing mounting pressure, the Shah made several attempts to placate the opposition. In August 1978, he replaced his prime minister with Jafar Sharif Imami, who was perceived to be more conciliatory. Sharif Imami lifted some restrictions on political activity, promised free elections, and made gestures towards appeasing the religious opposition, such as closing down gambling casinos and announcing that the Islamic calendar would be used officially. However, these concessions were seen as too little, too late. The opposition had become too entrenched and determined, and the Shah's attempts at reform were viewed with suspicion. The regime's credibility had been severely damaged, and trust in the Shah's promises was non-existent. Furthermore, the Shah's health was deteriorating, and his indecisiveness added to the sense of a regime in decline. The situation took a dramatic turn on September 8, 1978, known as Black Friday. On this day, the military opened fire on protesters in Tehran's Jaleh Square, resulting in hundreds of deaths. This brutal crackdown marked a point of no return for many Iranians. The massacre galvanized the opposition and delegitimized the Shah's regime in the eyes of the world. It became clear that the regime was willing to use any means necessary to stay in power, further alienating the population. Strikes and economic paralysis. By the autumn of 1978, strikes had become widespread, affecting key sectors of the economy. The oil workers' strike was particularly significant. Iran's economy was heavily dependent on oil revenues, and the strike brought production to a standstill. The shutdown of oil refineries and the halt in oil exports had a crippling effect on the country's finances and international standing. The strikes were not limited to the oil sector. Workers in other industries, including the banking, transportation, and communication sectors, also went on strike. These strikes paralyzed the country and demonstrated the depth of the opposition's support. The unity and organization of the striking workers highlighted the regime's inability to maintain control. The final collapse of the Shah's regime. By late 1978, the Shah's regime was in a state of collapse. Internationally, the Shah lost the support of his key ally, the United States. President Jimmy Carter's administration, initially supportive of the Shah, began to distance itself as the situation in Iran deteriorated. The Shah's appeals for military and financial aid were met with reluctance as the U.S. grappled with the growing unpopularity of supporting a repressive regime. Domestically, the regime's collapse became evident when high-ranking officials and military officers began to defect or express support for the revolution. The Shah, realizing the hopelessness of his position, decided to leave Iran. On January 16, 1979, he and his family departed the country, ostensibly for a vacation, but it was clear that they were fleeing the revolutionary fervor. The departure of the Shah marked a significant turning point. The Pahlavi dynasty, which had ruled Iran for over 5 decades, had effectively come to an end. In his absence, a provisional government was established, but it lacked legitimacy and control. The real power lay with the revolutionaries, who were increasingly organizing under the leadership of Ayatollah Khomeini. The outbreak of revolution. With the Shah's departure in January 1979 and Ayatollah Khomeini's triumphant return in February, the Iranian Revolution reached its climactic phase. The collapse of the Pahlavi regime and the power vacuum it left behind led to a series of dramatic events that fundamentally transformed Iran's political and social landscape. Khomeini's return and the establishment of the Islamic Republic. On February 1, 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini returned to Iran after 15 years in exile. His arrival was met with extraordinary jubilation as millions of Iranians lined the streets to welcome him. Khomeini's return was not just a personal triumph, but also a symbolic victory for the revolutionaries who had fought against the Shah's regime. His presence in Iran galvanized the revolutionary movement and provided a clear leader around whom the opposition could rally. Immediately upon his return, Khomeini began to establish the foundations of a new government. He appointed Mehdi Bazargan as the prime minister of a provisional government, which was tasked with managing the transition from the monarchy to a republic. However, real power increasingly lay with Khomeini and the revolutionary councils that were forming across the country. These councils, composed of various revolutionary groups, began to take control of local governance, effectively sidelining the provisional government. The collapse of the Pahlavi regime. The departure of the Shah had left a power vacuum that the provisional government struggled to fill. The military, which had been a pillar of the Shah's regime, was demoralized and fragmented. Many high-ranking officers, uncertain about their future, chose to either defect or remain neutral. Without a cohesive military force to support it, the provisional government found it increasingly difficult to maintain order. In February 1979, this fragility was laid bare. On February 9th and 10th, clashes erupted between pro-Khomeini revolutionaries and loyalist troops of the Imperial Guard. The fighting reached its peak when a group of Air Force technicians at the Dozhan-Tepe Air Base mutinied and declared their support for Khomeini. The Imperial Guard attempted to suppress the mutiny, leading to intense street battles in Tehran. Revolutionary forces, including the Fedayeen and Mujahideen, joined the fight, eventually overwhelming the loyalist forces. By February 11, 1979, the situation had become untenable for the provisional government. Prime Minister Bazargan resigned, and the Pahlavi regime effectively ceased to exist. Khomeini declared victory, and Iran was now under the control of the revolutionary forces. Establishment of the Islamic Republic. With the collapse of the old regime, Khomeini moved swiftly to consolidate power and establish a new political order based on Islamic principles. On April 1, 1979, following a national referendum in which an overwhelming majority of Iranians voted in favor of establishing an Islamic Republic, Khomeini declared the official establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Khomeini's vision for Iran was clear: a theocratic state governed by Islamic law, Sharia, with himself as the supreme leader, holding ultimate authority over all political and religious matters. This new constitution, which was drafted and ratified later in the year, established the framework for the Islamic Republic. It included the concept of Vilayat-e-Faqih, guardianship of the Islamic jurist, which granted the supreme leader extensive powers. The transition to the Islamic Republic involved significant changes to Iran's political and social structures. Revolutionary committees and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) were established to maintain order and enforce the new laws. The judiciary was restructured to align with Islamic principles, and secular laws were replaced with Sharia-based legislation. Social and cultural transformations. The revolution brought about profound social and cultural changes. One of the most visible changes was the imposition of strict Islamic dress codes. Women were required to wear the hijab, and public spaces were segregated by gender. The new government also imposed restrictions on cultural activities, including music, cinema, and literature, which were now subject to Islamic guidelines. Educational reforms were implemented to align with Islamic values. The curriculum was revised to emphasize Islamic teachings, and religious studies became a central component of the education system. Universities were purged of faculty and students deemed un-Islamic, and new institutions were established to promote Islamic scholarship. The revolution also aimed to address social injustices and improve the welfare of the poor. Land redistribution was revisited, and efforts were made to provide housing, healthcare, and education to the underprivileged. These measures, while ambitious, faced significant challenges due to economic difficulties and the aftermath of the revolutionary turmoil. The hostage crisis and international relations. One of the most dramatic and consequential events in the immediate aftermath of the revolution was the hostage crisis. On November 4, 1979, a group of Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage. The students demanded the extradition of the Shah, who was in the United States for medical treatment, to stand trial in Iran. The hostage crisis lasted for 444 days and became a defining moment in U.S.-Iran relations. It led to the severance of diplomatic ties between the two countries and the imposition of economic sanctions on Iran. The crisis also had a profound impact on Iranian politics, strengthening the position of the radicals who opposed any rapprochement with the West. Consolidation of power. In the months and years following the revolution, Khomeini and his supporters worked to consolidate their power. This process involved the elimination of rival factions within the revolutionary movement. Secular nationalists, leftists, and other groups that had initially supported the revolution found themselves increasingly marginalized or repressed. The Islamic Republic's security apparatus, including the IRGC and the intelligence services, played a crucial role in this consolidation. These organizations were tasked with rooting out counter-revolutionary elements and ensuring loyalty to the new regime. The trials and executions of former regime officials and political opponents became a grim feature of the early years of the Islamic Republic. The establishment of the new order. The Iranian Revolution marked the beginning of a new era in Iran's history, characterized by the establishment of an Islamic Republic under the leadership of Ayatollah Khomeini. This period saw significant political, social, and economic changes as the new regime sought to implement its vision of an Islamic state. The creation of the Islamic Republic. With the declaration of the Islamic Republic on April 1, 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini and his supporters set about building a new political system grounded in Islamic principles. The cornerstone of this system was the concept of vilayat-e-faqih, or guardianship of the Islamic jurist, which placed supreme authority in the hands of the supreme leader. Khomeini, as the first supreme leader, wielded extensive powers, including control over the military, judiciary, and media. The new constitution, ratified in December 1979, formalized the structure of the Islamic Republic. It established a dual system of governance, combining elements of theocracy and democracy. While the supreme leader held ultimate authority, other institutions such as the president, parliament, Mejlis, and the Assembly of Experts were created to handle administrative and legislative functions. However, these bodies were subject to the oversight of the Supreme Leader and the Guardian Council, which ensured that all laws and policies adhered to Islamic principles. Social and cultural reforms. One of the most immediate changes following the revolution was the implementation of strict Islamic social and cultural policies. The new government imposed a mandatory dress code for women, requiring them to wear the hijab and dress modestly in public. This policy was enforced by the newly established morality police, who monitored public behavior and ensured compliance with Islamic norms. Cultural activities were also subject to strict regulations. The government censored books, films, and music that were deemed un-Islamic or morally corrupt. Western cultural influences were particularly targeted, as the regime sought to purge Iran of what it saw as decadent and corrupting foreign elements. This cultural purge extended to education, where the curriculum was overhauled to emphasize Islamic values and teachings. The Islamic Republic also introduced significant changes to the legal system. Sharia law became the foundation of the legal code, replacing many secular laws that had been in place under the Shah. This shift had profound implications for various aspects of life, including family law, criminal justice, and civil rights. For example, the new laws imposed severe penalties for crimes such as theft and adultery, and the judicial system was restructured to ensure that judges were well versed in Islamic jurisprudence. Economic policies and challenges. Economically, the new regime faced significant challenges. The revolutionary turmoil had disrupted the economy, and the imposition of Western sanctions following the hostage crisis further exacerbated these difficulties. The government's economic policies aimed to address social inequalities and improve the welfare of the poor, but achieving these goals proved to be challenging. One of the regime's key economic initiatives was land redistribution. The government sought to redistribute land to small farmers and the rural poor, continuing the efforts begun during the White Revolution. However, the implementation of these policies was fraught with difficulties, including bureaucratic inefficiencies and resistance from powerful landowners. As a result, many of the intended beneficiaries did not receive the land they were promised, and agricultural productivity remained low. In addition to land reform, the government implemented policies to nationalize key industries, including oil, banking, and manufacturing. These measures were intended to reduce foreign influence and increase state control over the economy. While nationalization helped to consolidate the regime's power, it also led to economic inefficiencies and corruption. The lack of experienced management and investment hindered the growth of these industries, contributing to economic stagnation. Political repression and consolidation of power. The early years of the Islamic Republic were marked by political repression as the new regime sought to consolidate its power and eliminate potential threats. Various opposition groups, including secular nationalists, leftists, and other revolutionary factions, were systematically suppressed. Many political activists were arrested, imprisoned, or executed, and independent newspapers and political organizations were shut down. The regime's security apparatus, including the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) and the intelligence services, played a crucial role in this repression. These organizations were tasked with maintaining internal security and enforcing the regime's policies. The IRGC, in particular, emerged as a powerful institution with significant influence over both military and civilian affairs. One of the most significant episodes of political repression occurred in 1981 when the regime faced a major challenge from the People's Mujahideen of Iran, MEK, a leftist Islamist militant group. The MEK, which had initially supported the revolution, turned against the regime and launched a campaign of bombings and assassinations. In response, the government launched a brutal crackdown, arresting and executing thousands of MEK members and supporters. This campaign effectively crushed the MEK's presence in Iran and served as a warning to other potential dissidents. Foreign policy and regional impact. The revolution also had a profound impact on Iran's foreign policy and its relations with the broader Middle East. The new regime adopted a vehemently anti-Western stance, particularly towards the United States, which it labeled the Great Satan. This hostility was partly a reaction to the perceived American interference in Iran's internal affairs and the support the Shah had received from the U.S. The hostage crisis, in which 52 American diplomats and citizens were held hostage for 444 days, epitomized the regime's confrontational approach. The crisis led to the severance of diplomatic ties between Iran and the U.S. and the imposition of economic sanctions that severely impacted Iran's economy. The hostage crisis also played a significant role in shaping American perceptions of Iran and contributing to the long-standing enmity between the two nations. Regionally, the Iranian Revolution inspired Islamist movements across the Middle East and beyond. Iran positioned itself as a champion of Islamic causes and sought to export its revolutionary ideology. This approach led to tensions with neighboring countries, particularly those with significant Shia populations, such as Iraq and Bahrain. The revolution's influence was seen as a threat by many Sunni-dominated regimes, leading to a complex and often hostile regional dynamic. One of the most significant consequences of the revolution was the Iran-Iraq War, which began in 1980. The war was partly a result of Iraq's fear of the spread of Iran's revolutionary ideology and its desire to assert its dominance in the region. The conflict lasted for 8 years and resulted in significant loss of life and economic devastation for both countries. The war also solidified the Iranian regime's hold on power, as the need to defend the country against external aggression helped to rally the population around the government. Legacy and impact of the Iranian Revolution. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 was a watershed moment that left an indelible mark on Iran and the wider world. Its legacy is complex and multifaceted, influencing not only the political and social fabric of Iran but also having significant regional and global ramifications. Long-term social and political changes in Iran. In the decades following the revolution, the Islamic Republic of Iran underwent numerous transformations. The theocratic system established by Ayatollah Khomeini solidified, with the supreme leader retaining ultimate authority over all state affairs. The concept of Vilayat-e-Faqih became deeply embedded in Iran's political culture, ensuring that religious leadership continued to play a central role in governance. The revolution brought about substantial changes in Iranian society. Women's rights, which had seen some advancement under the Shah, were significantly curtailed under the new regime. The imposition of strict dress codes and limitations on women's participation in public life marked a departure from the modernization policies of the previous era. However, over time, women in Iran adapted and found ways to assert their agency within the confines of the new system. Education and employment opportunities for women, while restricted, did not disappear entirely, and women continued to contribute to various sectors of society. The revolution also fostered a sense of national identity and independence. The Islamic Republic's emphasis on self-reliance and resistance to foreign influence resonated with many Iranians who took pride in their country's sovereignty. This nationalist sentiment was further bolstered by Iran's ability to withstand external pressures, such as the prolonged conflict with Iraq and economic sanctions imposed by Western countries. Economic challenges and developments. Economically, the revolution brought mixed results. The initial years of the Islamic Republic were marked by economic turmoil, exacerbated by the Iran-Iraq War and international sanctions. The war, which lasted from 1980 to 1988, had a devastating impact on Iran's infrastructure and economy, causing significant loss of life and financial hardship. Despite these challenges, Iran managed to rebuild and diversify its economy over time. The government invested in various sectors, including agriculture, manufacturing, and technology, to reduce dependency on oil revenues. Efforts to develop a self-sufficient economy led to advancements in industries such as pharmaceuticals, petrochemicals, and military technology. However, persistent issues such as corruption, mismanagement, and ongoing sanctions continued to hinder economic progress. Regional influence and geopolitical dynamics. The Iranian Revolution had profound implications for the Middle East and beyond. The establishment of an Islamic Republic in Iran inspired Islamist movements across the region, challenging the status quo in many countries. Iran's support for groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon and various Shia militias in Iraq reflected its strategy of exporting the revolution and expanding its influence. This approach led to strained relations with many of Iran's neighbors, particularly the Sunni-dominated Gulf states and Saudi Arabia. The rivalry between Iran and Saudi Arabia became a defining feature of Middle Eastern geopolitics, manifesting in proxy conflicts in countries like Syria and Yemen. The sectarian dimension of this rivalry further complicated regional dynamics, contributing to ongoing instability and conflict. The revolution also impacted Iran's relationship with the West. The hostage crisis, the Iran-Iraq War, and Iran's support for militant groups led to a contentious relationship with the United States and its allies. The imposition of economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation became tools used by Western powers to exert pressure on the Iranian regime. Despite periodic attempts at rapprochement, such as the Iran nuclear deal in 2015, relations between Iran and the West remained fraught with tension and mistrust. The revolution's global influence. Globally, the Iranian Revolution had a ripple effect, influencing political and ideological movements far beyond the Middle East. The success of an Islamic revolution challenged the prevailing secular and nationalist ideologies in many Muslim-majority countries. It provided a model for Islamist groups seeking to overthrow secular regimes and establish Islamic governance. The revolution also had implications for the Cold War dynamics of the time. The fall of the Shah, a key ally of the United States, was seen as a setback for American influence in the region. Conversely, it presented opportunities for the Soviet Union to expand its reach, although the Islamic Republic's anti-communist stance prevented a straightforward alignment with the Eastern Bloc. The enduring impact on Iranian society. Today, the legacy of the Iranian Revolution continues to shape Iran's domestic and foreign policies. The political system established in 1979 remains intact, with periodic elections for the presidency and parliament conducted under the supervision of the Guardian Council. While these elections provide a semblance of democracy, the ultimate authority of the supreme leader ensures that theocratic principles prevail. The revolution's impact on Iranian society is evident in the ongoing debates about social and political reforms. While the regime has maintained strict control over political expression, there are frequent calls for greater freedoms and more significant reforms from within the population. The youth, in particular, who constitute a substantial portion of Iran's population, often express aspirations for a more open and progressive society. In conclusion, the Iranian Revolution was a defining event of the 20th century, with far-reaching consequences that continue to influence Iran and the world today. Its legacy is complex, marked by significant social, political, and economic changes, as well as profound regional and global impacts. As we reflect on the revolution, it is essential to recognize both its transformative power and the enduring challenges it has created for Iran and the broader Middle East. Key figures of the Iranian Revolution. The Iranian Revolution was driven by numerous influential figures whose actions and ideas shaped the course of events. Here, we will delve into the lives and contributions of some of the most significant personalities involved in the revolution. 1. Ayatollah Khomeini. Early life and education. Ruhollah Khomeini was born on September 24, 1902, in the small town of Khomeini in central Iran. His early life was marked by the loss of his father, who was killed when Khomeini was just 5 months old. Raised in a devout Shia Muslim family, Khomeini pursued religious studies from a young age. He studied in the holy cities of Iraq and Qom, where he was mentored by prominent clerics and developed a deep understanding of Islamic jurisprudence and philosophy. Rise to prominence. Khomeini's rise to prominence began in the 1940s and 1950s, when he emerged as a vocal critic of the Shah's policies, particularly those related to secularization and westernization. His sermons and writings condemned the Pahlavi regime's suppression of political freedoms and its close ties with Western powers, especially the United States. In 1963, Khomeini's outspoken opposition to the Shah's White Revolution, which included land reforms and women's suffrage, led to his arrest and subsequent exile. He spent the next 14 years in Iraq and later in France, continuing to inspire resistance against the Shah through his writings and speeches, which were smuggled into Iran. Leadership of the revolution. Khomeini's influence reached its peak in the late 1970s as widespread discontent against the Shah's regime grew. His return to Iran on February 1, 1979, marked a turning point in the revolution. Greeted by millions of supporters, Khomeini quickly moved to consolidate power and establish an Islamic Republic. As supreme leader, he wielded immense authority, shaping the new political order and enforcing Islamic laws. Legacy. Khomeini's legacy is profound and multifaceted. He transformed Iran from a monarchy to a theocracy, introducing a political system that combined elements of democracy and religious rule. His concept of Vilayat-e-Faqih, guardianship of the Islamic jurist, remains a cornerstone of Iran's governance. Khomeini's vision of an Islamic state continues to influence Iranian politics and society, as well as Islamist movements worldwide. 2. Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. Early life and ascension to power. Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi was born October 26, 1919, in Tehran. He was the eldest son of Reza Shah, the founder of the Pahlavi dynasty. Mohammad Reza Shah ascended to the throne in 1941 after the forced abdication of his father by the Allied forces during World War II. His early reign was marked by efforts to modernize Iran and strengthen the monarchy. Modernization and the White Revolution. The Shah's modernization policies, particularly the White Revolution launched in 1963, aimed to transform Iran into a modern, industrialized state. The White Revolution included land reforms, the expansion of education, and the promotion of women's rights. However, these policies also led to significant social upheaval and increased opposition from traditional and religious segments of society. Autocratic rule and opposition. The Shah's rule became increasingly autocratic over time. Political dissent was suppressed by the Savak, the secret police, and political freedoms were severely restricted. The Shah's close ties with Western powers, especially the United States, further alienated many Iranians who viewed his regime as subservient to foreign interests. Downfall and exile. The growing discontent culminated in the mass protests of 1978 and 1979. Unable to quell the revolutionary fervor, the Shah left Iran on January 16, 1979, ostensibly for medical treatment. He never returned to Iran, spending the remainder of his life in exile. The Shah died in Cairo, Egypt, on July 27, 1980. Legacy. The Shah's legacy is complex. While he is credited with initiating significant modernization and development projects, his autocratic rule and failure to address social and political grievances ultimately led to his downfall. His departure marked the end of the Pahlavi dynasty and the beginning of a new era in Iranian history. 3. Mehdi Bazargan. Early life and education. Mehdi Bazargan was born on September 1, 1907, in Tehran. He pursued engineering studies in France, earning a degree from the École Centrale des Arts et Manufactures. Upon returning to Iran, he became involved in various academic and political activities, advocating for democratic reforms and modernization. Political career in opposition to the Shah. Bazargan was a prominent member of the National Front, a political coalition that opposed the Shah's autocratic rule and sought greater political freedoms. He served as the head of the National Iranian Oil Company and later as the Minister of Education. His commitment to democratic principles and nonviolent resistance earned him widespread respect. Prime Minister of the Provisional Government. Following the Shah's departure and the return of Ayatollah Khomeini, Bazargan was appointed as the Prime Minister of the Provisional Government on February 4, 1979. His government was tasked with managing the transition from the monarchy to the Islamic Republic. However, Bazargan faced significant challenges, including opposition from more radical revolutionary factions and the deteriorating security situation. Resignation and later life. Bazargan's tenure as Prime Minister was short-lived. The takeover of the U.S. Embassy and the subsequent hostage crisis undermined his government's authority. Frustrated by his inability to implement moderate policies and maintain order, Bazargan resigned on November 6, 1979. He continued to advocate for democratic reforms and human rights until his death on January 20, 1995. Legacy. Mehdi Bazargan is remembered as a principled and moderate political leader who sought to balance Islamic values with democratic governance. His efforts to promote democracy and civil liberties left a lasting impact on Iranian politics, even though his time in power was brief. 4. Ali Shariati. Early life and education. Ali Shariati was born on November 23, 1933, in Mazandaran, Iran. He studied sociology in France, where he was exposed to various revolutionary ideologies and became involved in political activism. Shariati's writings and lectures combined Islamic principles with revolutionary ideas, advocating for social justice and the empowerment of the oppressed. Intellectual contributions and influence. Shariati's work had a profound impact on the intellectual and ideological underpinnings of the Iranian Revolution. He sought to reinterpret Sharia Islam in a way that emphasized its revolutionary potential. His concepts of red Shurism contrasted with the more passive black Shurism and called for active resistance against tyranny and oppression. Role in the revolution. Shariati's ideas resonated with many young Iranians and contributed to the revolutionary fervor of the late 1970s. His emphasis on social justice, anti-imperialism, and the need for a return to Islamic values provided a compelling narrative for those disillusioned with the Shah's regime. Death and legacy. Shariati died under mysterious circumstances in London on June 19, 1977. His death was widely believed to be an assassination orchestrated by SAVAK, the Shah's secret police. Despite his untimely death, Shariati's writings continued to inspire the revolutionary movement and played a significant role in shaping the ideology of the Islamic Republic. Legacy. Ali Shariati is remembered as a visionary intellectual who sought to merge Islamic principles with revolutionary ideals. His work continues to be studied and revered in Iran and beyond, influencing contemporary discussions on Islam, politics, and social justice. Influential global figures during the Iranian Revolution. The Iranian Revolution was not only shaped by internal dynamics but also influenced by significant global figures. These individuals, through their actions and policies, played crucial roles in the international context of the revolution. Here, we will explore the lives and contributions of some of these key global figures. 1. Jimmy Carter. Early life and political career. James Earl Jimmy Carter Jr. was born October 1, 1924, in Plains, Georgia, USA. He graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1946 and served in the Navy before returning to Georgia to manage his family's peanut farming business. Carter's political career began in the Georgia State Senate, and he later served as the governor of Georgia from 1971 to 1975. In 1976, Carter was elected as the 39th President of the United States. Carter's presidency and the Iranian Revolution. During Carter's presidency, U.S. foreign policy emphasized human rights and democratic principles. Initially, Carter supported the Shah of Iran, viewing him as a stabilizing force and a key ally in the Middle East. However, as the revolution gained momentum, Carter faced a complex situation. The Shah's regime, characterized by human rights abuses and political repression, conflicted with Carter's human rights agenda. As protests in Iran escalated, Carter attempted to navigate a delicate balance between supporting the Shah and addressing the growing discontent among Iranians. In 1978, Carter urged the Shah to implement political reforms, hoping to stabilize the situation. Despite these efforts, the revolution continued to gain strength, and by January 1979, the Shah fled Iran. The hostage crisis. One of the most significant events during Carter's presidency was the Iran hostage crisis. On November 4, 1979, Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 52 American diplomats and citizens hostage. The crisis lasted 444 days and became a defining issue of Carter's presidency. Efforts to negotiate the hostages' release were unsuccessful, and a rescue mission in April 1980 ended in disaster, further damaging Carter's standing. Legacy. The hostage crisis and the Iranian Revolution significantly impacted Carter's presidency, contributing to his defeat in the 1980 presidential election. Despite these challenges, Carter's post-presidential career has been marked by humanitarian work and advocacy for human rights. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002 for his efforts in advancing peace and democracy. 2. Leonid Brezhnev. Early life and political career. Leonid Ilyich Brezhnev was born on December 19, 1906, in Kamenskoye, Ukraine, then part of the Russian Empire. He joined the Communist Party in 1931 and rose through the ranks, eventually becoming a key figure in Soviet politics. Brezhnev served as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union from 1964 until his death in 1982. Brezhnev's leadership in the Iranian Revolution. Brezhnev's tenure as Soviet leader was marked by efforts to maintain and expand Soviet influence globally. The Soviet Union's relationship with Iran was complex. While the Shah's regime was a staunch ally of the United States, the Soviet Union maintained cautious diplomatic ties with Iran, focusing on strategic interests in the region. During the Iranian Revolution, the Soviet Union observed the unfolding events with keen interest. The revolution presented both opportunities and risks for Soviet influence in the Middle East. Although the new Islamic Republic was ideologically opposed to both Western capitalism and Soviet communism, the USSR saw the potential to weaken American influence in the region. Soviet involvement in Afghanistan. The Iranian Revolution had a significant impact on Soviet actions in the region, particularly in Afghanistan. Concerned about the spread of Islamic fundamentalism and its potential to destabilize neighboring countries, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in December 1979. This intervention aimed to support the pro-Soviet Afghan government but led to a prolonged and costly conflict. Legacy. Brezhnev's leadership during the late 1970s and early 1980s shaped the geopolitical landscape of the Cold War. His policies in the Middle East and the invasion of Afghanistan had lasting consequences, contributing to regional instability and the eventual decline of Soviet influence. Brezhnev's legacy is marked by his role in maintaining Soviet power and his impact on global geopolitics. 3. Anwar Sadat. Early life and political career. Muhammad Anwar el-Sadat was born on December 25, 1918, in Mit Abu el-Kham, Egypt. He joined the Egyptian military and was involved in the Free Officers movement that overthrew King Farouk in 1952. Sadat served as vice president under Gamal Abdel Nasser and succeeded him as president of Egypt in 1970. Sadat's leadership and relations with Iran. As president, Sadat pursued policies aimed at modernizing Egypt and fostering closer ties with the West. His most notable achievement was the signing of the Camp David Accords in 1978, which led to a peace treaty with Israel. This historic agreement earned Sadat the Nobel Peace Prize, but also drew criticism from many Arab nations and factions. During the Iranian Revolution, Sadat's relationship with the Shah of Iran played a significant role. Egypt and Iran enjoyed cordial relations, and Sadat provided refuge to the Shah after he fled Iran in January 1979. This decision strained Egypt's relations with the new Islamic Republic, which viewed the Shah as a symbol of tyranny. The assassination of Sadat. Sadat's policies, particularly the peace treaty with Israel, faced significant opposition within Egypt and the broader Arab world. On October 6, 1981, Sadat was assassinated by members of the Egyptian Islamic Jihad during a military parade. His death underscored the volatile political climate in the region and the challenges of pursuing peace and modernization in the Middle East. Legacy. Anwar Sadat's legacy is defined by his bold moves towards peace with Israel and his efforts to modernize Egypt. His support for the Shah during the Iranian Revolution highlights the intricate web of alliances and rivalries in the Middle East. Sadat's assassination was a tragic reminder of the deep-seated tensions and conflicts that continue to shape the region. For Ayatollah Mohammad Bakr al-Sadr. Early life and education. Ayatollah Mohammad Bakr al-Sadr was born on March 1, 1935, in Al-Kazimiya, Iraq. He was a prominent Shia cleric, philosopher, and political leader. Al-Sadr studied in the seminaries of Najaf, where he became known for his intellectual contributions to Islamic thought and his efforts to integrate modern philosophy with traditional Shia teachings. Role in the Islamic movement. Al-Sadr was a key figure in the Islamic movement in Iraq and played an influential role in shaping Shia political thought. He founded the Islamic Dawah Party, which aimed to establish an Islamic state in Iraq. His writings and teachings emphasized the need for an Islamic government based on justice and the principles of Sharia. Influence on the Iranian Revolution. Al-Sadr's ideas and leadership had a significant impact on the Iranian Revolution. His advocacy for an Islamic government resonated with many Iranians, and he maintained close ties with Ayatollah Khomeini. Al-Sadr's support for the revolution and his intellectual contributions helped to shape the ideological framework of the new Islamic Republic. Persecution and martyrdom. Al-Sadr's activities and his growing influence were viewed as a threat by the Ba'athist regime in Iraq, led by Saddam Hussein. In 1980, Al-Sadr and his sister Amina, known as Bint al-Huda, who was also a prominent religious figure, were arrested, tortured, and executed by the Iraqi government. Their martyrdom galvanized Shia opposition to Saddam's regime and underscored the brutal repression faced by Islamic activists in Iraq. Legacy. Ayatollah Mohammad Bakr al-Sadr is remembered as a visionary thinker and a martyr for the Shia cause. His intellectual contributions and political activism continue to inspire Shia movements in Iraq, Iran, and beyond. Al-Sadr's legacy is deeply intertwined with the broader struggle for justice and Islamic governance in the Shia world. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Iranian Revolution and the lives of the key figures who played pivotal roles during this transformative period. I hope you found this exploration both informative and engaging. If you enjoyed this video and would like to learn more about historical events and influential personalities, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. Your support helps us bring more fascinating content to you. Stay tuned for more in-depth stories and analyses. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.